for me, I think storytelling, creating content, adding value, looking to grow is a mindset. It's a opportunity. It's a way to create stories, way to create vision, way to be in a position where you can keep moving forward. My origin story really started, I think, when, I was really, really young and I was interested in learning about storytelling, learning about how do we create a captivating story, but also just that really unique, young, naive perspective when it comes to how we come across and what the stories we tell our friends and our family and what we learn from stories, I think, as well. And I think it's a point of view. I mean, for me, my storytelling journey, I started creating video content from gaming content and documenting my progress in video games and etc. from a very young age, and from that then led on to many other things. So when I was 11, I wanted to be a paramedic, and then as I sort of grew, I threw around the idea of becoming a CBT therapist, and then I was in the position where I was like, I could actually do it. But before that, I was like, okay, do I want to build video games for a living? Like, there was a lot of paths. And I think between the ages of probably, I would say 10 to maybe your 20s, it's very normal to transition and kind of try things. And I think that's really important for you if you're watching this and you're in that age range. But for me, I kind of went from, okay, paramedic, didn't really necessarily happen, then kind of led into this point of view where I was able to go to college and follow the traditional path into learning how to create computer games. That's where I gained my first understanding of code. That's where I gained my first understanding of like 3D modeling, that kind of thing. And then after that, I moved, and I guess I asked myself, I kind of completed my college course and I was in a position where I could have gone to uni. And I asked myself, I said, well, where are we? What am I? Do I see a future in that career path? And I think for me, there's a lot of people, and with the hindsight of now AI and etc. in that respect, I think there's a lot of people who I think that would have been a bad path for me personally, because I feel like that industry potentially abuses the fact that you love it a little bit, and there's lots of hours, there's lots of crunch time, and I spoke to some people at that time where there was quite a lot of people who were maybe over-concerned, overworked, overstressed. So I said, okay, well, what do I want to do? What do I want to build a career out of? How do I sort of get here? How do I move forward in that respect? And I think for me, at the same time, I had sort of picked up photography using a phone and, always captured images and was always in a position where I could and I would kind of look to grow and look to kind of see what I could capture and be kind of unique in that respect. And as I started getting into it, I was fortunate enough where I was given my first DSLR, and I started really learning the actual fundamentals of photography. So what's shutter speed, what's aperture, what's ISO, how do you focus, those kind of things, right? And I think so many people, they maybe find that place hard, that level difficult, or being incredibly difficult, because it is very manual, and they don't have a frustration. And I remember when I started, I did have a frustration in that respect, and I think it allowed me to start building a work ethic around, I actually need to push through an uncomfortability. I need to know how to utilize these tools, and I think that every day is a opportunity to learn. But as I started to understand a camera and get to more used to kind of what does shutter speed mean, what does aperture mean, what does ISO mean, those kind of things, I looked at the business of running a photography business and running a creative business and being in a position where, actually in Salisbury at the time, which is where I built a lot of the kind of starting momentum and starting business for what I'm doing now, there was a lot of people who were, to be honest, better than me, more experienced than me, out-kit me, and definitely out-confidence me at the time. And I looked at that and I said, okay, So what can I do? But I did see a gap in the market for video production, especially in Salisbury, and I didn't think that Salisbury was being promoted enough and showcased enough by the powers to be, so to speak. So I said, okay, yeah, I've always done kind of video. I've created gaming videos. I've had some success on YouTube previously, and I know how to be in front of camera. I know how to look into a RF lens. I know how to perform, so to speak. So I kind of continued, and I thought, okay, cool, yeah. So I started just reaching out to local businesses, reaching out to local events, and if someone's watching this and they maybe are struggling with building and they're in the first couple of years of their business, do stuff for free. Don't ask for, lead with value, lead with how can I help promote you, how can I help showcase you, and then the rest will look after itself. And I got to a position where I was promoting the city, I was promoting people, I was promoting the events, and this was around 2018 or so, and I just carried on doing that, and I still carry on doing that to this day. And it slowly but steadily grew and grew and grew until I got a reputation as the go-to video guy, right? Now, people ask me, well, how do you maybe pivot or charge more or look to add more value to clients specifically? And I think for me, it's number one, understanding where you sit in the market. Number two, having the balls, as a client said to me yesterday, to charge more in general and be confident in that request and being confident in that point of view. But also just understand where you are in your career. When I started, I did £300 jobs. I did a couple £100 here. Maybe at the really beginning, 20 quid cash in hand at the end of the night, 30 quid cash in hand at the end of the night, and it builds up. And I think for me, it's really important to be aware of where you are in your career. And there's kind of a couple of factors here. I think number one, you need to be in a financial position to be able to do that. So you need to have had some savings put away. You need to have some kind of background. But also number two, you need to be in a position where you've got the guts, you've got the ability to continue to work hard, to continue to leverage when things go wrong, kind of reaching out to someone who maybe you don't know and kind of explaining to them, hey, look, have you thought about doing this? Can I show you? Can I give you a demo? Can I give you a free video to show you and exchange a level of value in exchange for a testimonial, in exchange for some feedback on my business? And I think so many people, they worry about what if someone says no? And that was one of the first barriers that I have had previously to create content or reach out to clients or have kind of cold or just kind of have the gunzo to go and kind of get what I wanted and grow the business. And I think it's something you have to do at the start. And to be fair, there's other ways I do it now. I think in that process, it's like any muscle. I think as you do that, you will get better at it. You will move forward and actually leading with compassion to an extent, but also just being okay if they say no and being like, okay, it's all good. If there's no ROI for you, then that's fine. But I think you have to keep pushing and keep innovating and, just to finish off this kind of the story element, as I went full time in 2020, 2 weeks before COVID started, that was a very turbulent couple of years. I'm sure for every business it was, but mine especially. And I was in a position where I probably worked only about 6 months of the year, just because of some clients were cool with us coming to them and working with them still, but others were really concerned about COVID and about their family and about actually mingling with people and even when we were allowed to. So it did create this problem regarding my income, where I was, and I had just gone full time. So in some ways that was actually a really good thing, because I had developed a 6 month or so emergency fund of this is what my costs were. Also at the time, didn't really have many costs because I still lived at home. So it wasn't I've got rent to pay, I've got office rent to pay, I've got this, I've got that, I've got this, so on. So it was a position, you could say, that was great or was useful or allowed me to really get my teeth into, like, this is what can happen in the world. This is what, this is the things you can not have in a business plan. And this is stuff that you can have happen that wasn't meant to happen, right? I think especially as I grew into 2024, and 2023 was quite a rough year as we were looking at COVID, and 2024 was kind of turbulent. I looked for other things. I looked for other opportunities. So I got into wildlife at the time, and I started focusing on that. And the problem with that, and I still love what I do there, is that actually I got my marketing wrong. And a lot of the stuff I'm now doing is the counter opposite to that. It's how can I be valuable to a client from a marketing point of view? But something I, to an extent, didn't realize is actually that you need to lead with your best work, lead with your best knowledge, lead with your best understanding to be able to continue to move forward. And I think to have the freedom to be able to think about what you're doing with marketing only comes from a support network that loves you and trusts you and can give you that window of time and energy, but also number two, can allow you to be in a position where either you're creating personal debt, where you're taking out either a loan from a bank or you're loaning from Bank of Mum and Dad to kind of buy you some time, I guess you could say. And for me, I was very fortunate, and 2024 wasn't great. I've spoken very openly about it, but I've been very fortunate that in 2024, I was very focused on, okay, I'm in a hole, right? How do I get out of this hole? And how do I get to a position where I can be all right business-wise? I can continue to add value to my clients. I continue to have clients. I continue to have a strong pipeline coming in and not worrying about project by project by project and constantly worried about money. And I think that, for me, something I was fortunate about was I won a retainer towards the end of 2024 that I still have today. So that gives you sustained revenue, and building a model that gives you sustained revenue is powerful. But also number two, I had a strong support network. And I just had a really strong work ethic, and I just had this ability to continue to show up and work through, and I wasn't willing to give up the business. And even when things were harder or things were tighter, I still cut my costs and I focused in. And, there's been a conversation regarding like the fitness and your mindset and etc. around in the community at the moment as well. And I think when you're in a position in the community or in a community where you need to ask yourself, if the business isn't in a good place and you need to do those reps, you need to do that extra work to create content, you need to do that extra work to win clients, you need to do that extra work to build money, you need to take on those jobs that, or quote unquote, eat shit. I think you need to, and to an extent it is priorities, but you need to be okay with the fact that you might put on a couple of pounds. You might look a little bit fatter. You might not be as healthy. You might have to work a little bit harder and not necessarily sacrifice sleep, because you shouldn't, but you should be very focused on getting yourself out of that ditch. And you also need to ask yourself, like, what chapters in your life? And I think as I got into a more healthy relationship, that really allowed me to focus on keeping balance, but also understanding that actually I can continue to move forward. I continue to, lean into those traits. And I've been very fortunate, and I put a post out about a week ago, just before my 28th birthday, that I ended up actually working on. Didn't really bother celebrating it. Wasn't a big deal to me. But talking about, the three main people that you have in your life is your partner, your spouse, your wife, your husband, and what they mean and how they support you, and do they fight your corner and those kind of things. But also number two is then your parent or your parents, so in my case my mother, and what values had she installed into me. But then number three, your best friend. Right now I have some strong male friends, and we have very different conversations in how we operate. We have very different situations in respect to how we talk to each other and kind of the pushing that takes place in that respect. And I think that's the important element. And I think so much of life, so much of like who we are can be and there's loads of quotes I could use here, but I won't. But there's so much of the conversation, I guess you could say, or be in a position where you look at your inner circle, and that then reflects back to you on, okay, well, what are my results? You know, how honestly am I actually treating my work? How honestly and am I leading with the right values with my work? And am I showing up for those people in my inner circle, but also am I showing up for my clients? And I think there's a lot of people who are maybe slightly concerned about what the deal is with AI and, you know, some of the other concerns in marketing at the moment. I think it's one of those things where you need to ask yourself, are you trading time? Or are you there to create a result? And if you're there to create a result, in most cases, the client doesn't matter, doesn't really care that much, as long as the result is happening and you know, the things you promised and the things you're paid for, like, actually work, you know? And I think for me, the whole AI conversation, a lot of the conversations I'm having on the podcast and moving forward have said to me that, you know, actually, it's a tool and you should utilize it, and something I'm looking into my business when I've got my business development hat on for Brunton Media and what we're doing with the podcast, etc. is, okay, what can AI do? What can AI not do? And when it comes to optimizing my workflow, but also being in a position where I can scale, being in a position where I can move forward, being in a position where I can utilize it as a tool. And the analogy I've been using on shows recently is, you know, can I sharpen that knife before I use it to cut up something? And I think AI is the same. If you choose it and you use it to allow you to sharpen a tool, then you'll be able to utilize it better than otherwise you wouldn't.